What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Thing Goes back again for another video. And after reading the thumbnail to this, well, not thumbnail, but after reading like the title of this article, the only face I could really make was, let's get into it, man. Invincible, how the show fails the comic. Now, the guy who wrote this article is from bitch ass IGN and aRtICLe. Sorry if I pronounced your name wrong. Probably not gonna ever look at this video. Anyway, I did a video talking about this dude before he made a very interesting review of the first 3 episodes of Invincible, but it kind of made me like see that the guy probably doesn't know the point of the comic, or he probably hasn't really read the entire comic, or he might have pulled like a different understanding from the comic than most people. I don't know. It just seemed like a lot of the stuff he was complaining about in the show seemed rudimentary or just like stupid if he had read the comic. Like, you know, didn't really make a lot of sense. But I did feel like his review excuse me, was very interesting nonetheless, which is why I shared it with you all, because he has some interesting stuff to say about it, and this was before the show had dropped, so I still wanted to kind of see and gauge what people were saying out there about it. And like I said, it was one of the more interesting reviews that I covered on the channel. I think it's the only review because it was one of the first ones that dropped. But it was very lengthy. He used all these big fancy words like he knew what he was talking about. But at the end of the day, I disagree with the nigga completely, because after I watched the show, like I saw his review, right? And I was just like, I had my guard up a little bit, but I wasn't tripping. And then I watched it and I'm just like, bruh, I don't know what the fuck this dude is talking about. Like what the fuck? Like, was we watching the same show, bruh? And now he done dropped this article. This is part 2. Just gotta share this with y'all if y'all haven't read it. So, like I said, Invincible, how the show fails the comic. The Amazon adaptation hasn't lived up to the promise of Robert Kirkman's comic yet. All right, let's go into it. This article was actually dropped March 30th. I'm late on it, but I still wanted to make a video on it because, like I said, I made that video on the first one, and I remember seeing this article, but it took me so long to actually get around to making the video. So, sorry it took so long, but I'm gonna go ahead and go through it now. And also, spoilers for the first 3 episodes ahead if you haven't, you know what I'm saying, like watched it or whatever. The first 3 episodes of Invincible, based on the early 2000s Image comic, are now streaming on Amazon Prime. The adult animated show was greenlit in 2018 with a separate live-action film en route, and it arrives in a media culture dominated by superhero adaptations. Now that's the first thing, excuse me, that's the first thing that I said will probably turn people off a lot from Invincible. The fact there's already so many superhero stuff. Even The Boys, it makes fun of superheroes, and it came out like a couple of years before Invincible. So it's like, I feel like the market is so flooded with so much superhero stuff that Invincible, unfortunately, came out at the tail end of it. But it's quality. It's better than a lot of other stuff out there that's, you know what I'm saying, including the stuff that it came after. So I think it's just a case of bad timing. But if you stick it out, you'll see that it's well worth the watch. Now see, it arrived in a media culture dominated by superhero adaptations. Its bright palette clashes wildly with the unapologetic gore, according to comic creator Robert Kirkman. The point is to depict the very consequences of violence in a very real way, which I agree with. I always thought the action in Invincible, while over the top and just gore induced, in a superhero situation, I feel like they always kind of shy from this shit when it comes to like superhero stories and stuff like that, bro. It gets raw. Like, I would imagine that if a laser blast shoots a building and destroys it into a bunch of pieces and rubble, when it lands on the ground off screen, it's probably smushing some motherfuckers. You know what I'm saying? Invincible turns the camera on those people getting smushed. That's all it does. You know what I'm saying? Ain't nothing wrong with that. But the series often struggles with this depiction. So pretty much he's saying that the show, its bright palette clashes wildly with it's unapologetic gore. So saying like, you know, the show looks like a regular cartoon you might see on Cartoon Network, or I don't know, CW or Young Justice, shit, DC Universe, whatever the fuck. It looked like your typical Ben 10 Generator X, you know what I'm saying, type stuff. But as soon as the action starts, you just be like, whoa, what the fuck? Like, okay, so this is super mature. This is for adults. Like, I don't know what... Me, I don't think that's a problem. I like that. I think we need that. I think that's something different. But according to him, it clashes and it doesn't fit, and the story just takes an overall hit because of it. And I don't agree with that at all. Like, excuse me if I'm taking what he said out of context, but that's just what I'm getting from what he's saying in oh so many words. And bruh is flexing. Like I don't understand what he is talking about. That is the whole point of the comic, bruh. If you don't like it, if you don't like the violence, bruh, if you're squeamish, man, then you don't need to be on this journey, man. That's all I'm gonna say. Let's see, let's say. But the series often struggles with this depiction, a flaw which can be illuminated through comparisons to its source material and the comic landscape of the time in which it originated. The show's first episode ends with a major twist borrowed from the comic's second volume. The Superman-like alien hero Omni-Man Nolan Grayson, J.K. Simmons' character, father to teen protagonist Invincible Mark Grayson, Stephen Ewan's character, breaks bad and murders a show parody Justice League by the Guardians of the Globe. It's a grisly, drawn-out sequence where each member of the team meets a vicious end, and it's also a definitive statement about the show's tone moving forward. The next two episodes unfold in a massacre gloomy aftermath, though Mark doesn't yet know about his father's involvement. But where the show stumbles is in its use of several satirical ideas and concepts from the comic, which it reconstructs into a mostly dour depiction of the superhero. Invincible arrives just 2 years after Avengers Endgame, which saw half the world reduced to dust just weeks after WandaVision, a show steeped in grief and anguish. A mere days after Zack Snyder. Bro, why is this nigga throwing out, like, hold on, bruh. It was kind of hard for me to keep going with this, bro. I don't care what you saying, what you trying to do, what you trying to like explain. First off, why the fuck are you throwing so many other properties and so many other stories in this article, bro? What the fuck does this got to do with Invincible, bro? Like, what does this have to do with Invincible, bro? This man said, okay, I'm sorry. Just 2 years after Endgame, which saw half the world reduced to dust. Just weeks after WandaVision, a show steeped in grief and anguish. A mere days after Zack Snyder's Justice League. A waggering saga about parents and children. Whether by accident or by design, the show fits perfectly into the current superhero landscape and its weighty overtones. This wasn't the case for the original comic series, which began in 2003. Wait, so is he saying it fits with the... I don't know what this nigga's saying, but he gotta start throwing all these other stories up in here, bro. He confusing a nigga right now. So he says the birth of Invincible. To talk about the Invincible comic is to talk about the dreaded industry period that was the 1990s. The medium saw a major boom at the start of the decade, with X-Men #1 selling a record 8 million copies. Damn, I did not know that shit. Superman #75, The Death of Superman, selling 6 million. Whew. The X-Force #1 not far behind with 5 million. Shit, bro, this was the golden age right here. But success brought with it a growing speculation bubble and a glut of renumberings, gritty relaunches, headline-grabbing events, and altering covers aimed at collectors. It sounds incredibly similar to the 2010s, which featured line-wide comic reboots every few years. Only in the 90s, the risk often outweighed the reward. Major publisher Marvel, for instance, didn't yet have Disney money behind it and filed for bankruptcy in 1996. Now, I did know about that. The aesthetic of the time tended towards the extreme, led by the muscle-bound creator-owned titles at Image like Bloodstrike and Youngblood. With Marvel, you gotta give it up to the OGs, you already know. With Marvel and DC following suit, the big two publishers focus not only on bloodshed, but on adolescent angst aimed at the teenage crowd. Among the most popular characters at Marvel and DC were hulking eyesores like X-Force and the moody leather-jacketed teenager Superboy. Even if you weren't an avid reader at the time, you know exactly what the 90s comic looked like. Invincible began in January 2003. And it felt not only like a response to the 90s, but a response to the industry's own response as a major publisher attempted to shed their juvenile and convoluted baggage, like DC's Green Lantern becoming evil and destroying his home city in 1994, or overstuffed X-Men events from the same period whose very names invoked excess, like Onslaught or the Phalanx Covenant. I don't know nothing about that shit. The turn of the decade marked a departure from these kinds of stories. In 2000, DC introduced prestigious Justice League stories like Tower of Babel to imbue their characters with a lost gravitas, while Marvel kicked off the Ultimate Comics universe, rewriting its long-running lore with an eye towards realism, relatively speaking. If the 90s were messy and violent, Marvel and DC's early 2000 revamps varied from grounded to grandiose. For both companies, each decade was serious in its own unique way. However, neither company was particularly tongue-in-cheek about its own lore and iconography. I know I'm just butchering that, but fuck it. Meta characters like Deadpool were rare exceptions, which is where Invincible came in. A comic that treated both excess and mythology as mundane and mined humor from treating superpowered burdens and expectations like puberty or history class test. Even once the series had been underway for nearly 2 years, it continued to feel like a sharp contrast to the major comic events which followed, like Avengers Disassembled, i.e. the basis for a WandaVision story about world-altering grief, and DC's grim, sexual assault-centric identity crisis, both in late 2004. I didn't read that, so I don't know nothing about that. In Invincible's first few issues, major superhero goings on were mere background noise to Mark's humdrum high school life, and the series was unafraid to knock the more serious comic tropes of the time. For instance, a page in which characters comment on the repeated use of steel panels for dramatic effect plays out in the form of, you guessed it, a steel panel repeated numerous times. More than, hey, I remember that shit. That was when Mark was talking to the comic book creator of Science Dog. He was actually at the comic book store. Mark surprisingly bumped into him, jetted to his car, got his comics, got in line so he can get all of them signed. And he asked the creator, why does he draw his comics like that? Or he asked him, how does he get so many comics out in the time that he does? And then the creator just straight up told him, bro, I just be copying and pasting this shit, bro. You switch a couple things around, bro. Man, these niggas ain't gonna figure out nothing. He like, ain't that a bit lazy? And he like, no. Like, shit, I don't know, nigga. So I love that part in the comic, actually, so it made me remember that. More than just taking jabs at industry convention, however, the series' humor lay in the contrast between the fantastical and the mundane. Adapting the comic for Amazon. The comic's superpowered plot often sprinted forward at breakneck speed, but the characters' personal lives felt much more languid. Mark's mother, Debbie, for instance, was resigned to spending quiet time around the house, and she anticipated Nolan's return from adventure. When he zipped through the living room and arrived at the dinner table faster than a speeding bullet, like in the comic's early pages, the couple immediately settled into a domestic rhythm and a how was your day conversation, as if Nolan had just returned from a regular 9-to-5. His antics may have involved fighting aliens, dragons, or interdimensional beings, but the emotional aftermath was always Nolan and Debbie's fraught. Smiling, acceptance, and their retrospective roles in society, a suburban dynamic which would eventually shatter once Nolan's true nature was revealed. Until that happened, things felt simple and familiar. The show, meanwhile, opens by presenting this world of superheroes as grandiose. It begins in the point of view of the White House security guard talking about his relationship with his stepson, but this more mundane emotional context isn't connected to the superpowered events which immediately follow. Conversely, Debbie and Mark's home lives in the comic were entangled with superheroism fight from the get-go. Instead, the security guard is caught in the middle of the assault on the presidential household, which is eventually thwarted by the Guardians of the Globe. Darkwing, a Batman riff, War Woman, you already know that's Wonder Woman, Green Ghost, Green Lantern, Red Rush, The Flash, Aquarius, Aquaman, Martian Manhunter, and so on. In the show, the human and the superhuman elements are presented as opposing forces. The violent and fantastical are sudden interruptions to normalcy rather than an intrinsic part of it. The Debbie doesn't have quite the same withheld objections to Nolan's absence. In the show, she's married to a capital S superhero and all the gravitas that comes with that identity. J.K. Simmons ends up oddly monotone in the process. I do kind of agree with that. I feel like J.K. Simmons ain't really, you know, doing what he could do with such a legendary actor like that. I feel like he's not really letting go with Omni-Man, but I feel like it's for a reason too. I mean, the guy kind of has to be subdued. That's kind of like how he is right now, but when everything comes to light, he's going to have a lot more layers to him as a character, so I'm interested to see how J.K. Simmons does that. Let's see here. And let's see, in the comic, she's married to a regular suburban dad who just so happens to be a superhero. The difference is palpable. The show's Nolan often comes off as brash, like he's annoyed with human beings, leaving little room to explore his deception and duality. I guess I can kind of see that, but okay, you know, it's like the more you read it, I guess you can kind of understand where he coming from with some of this stuff. You know what I'm saying? I don't agree with a lot of it, but some of it I can kind of see where he coming from. You know what I'm saying? So let's get back into it and finish this. Even the comic's more absurd and satirical elements are presented with self-seriousness in the Amazon series. For instance, the comic makes a big to-do about shadowy government suit Cecil Stedman, a Nick Fury type, gleefully and intentionally wasting millions of taxpayer money to teleport from place to place. It was a weary look at the actual mechanics of S.H.I.E.L.D.-like organizations in superhero comics and the actual power they wielded. The show adopts Cecil's use of teleportation but treats it as a mere background detail that doesn't seem to comment on it. It may in the future episode, and it may only seem like a minor logical difference in the interim, but it's also emblematic of the show's generic framing of its many concepts and ideas. In the first 3 hours, Invincible's version of Cecil Walton Goggins comes off as two-dimensional rather than darkly amusing like his comic book counterpart, because several of his actions are robbed of their sardonic context with being replaced by any other interesting tone or motivation. Now, I did think it was weird that they didn't say nothing about the teleportation. I saw it. I thought he was going to comment on it. I thought he was going to put that line in there. We didn't get to see that. We might still get the conversation between him and Invincible in the White Room. Did that happen in episode 4? I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. Still got to do my live reaction. But if he hasn't done that conversation and he doesn't do that conversation, that's going to kind of piss me off too. Shit. Are we gonna get the episode where he gotta go down to the water, you know what I'm saying, and like kind of like get like, you know, battle for the right to make love with the fish in the middle of the damn arena? Like, are we gonna get that episode? You know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder, are we gonna get all these little things that did make the comic book stand out? I do gotta give him that. Like, there are even, but here's the thing though. Where I don't agree with him is that even though he's right about these things not being there, I don't think it makes the show worse. I think the show has things that the comic doesn't have, and the comic has things that the show doesn't have. That's why I say they work well off of each other. I feel like you can't have one without the other. That's what I was talking about before. But yeah, man, this article just goes on and on and on and on and on, more like that. But pretty much all he's saying is, you know what I mean? What I was saying earlier, that he feels like it's just more of a personal preference at the end of the day. I feel like with him, it's more of a personal preference. Like, I don't feel like he should judge the whole show off that, or just say the whole show is like, you know what I'm saying, just put it out there that it's not that good off that or whatever. It's his opinion, I'll give him that. If he feels like that the contrast between how the animation and how the show is presented, the colors, the characters, how it might seem more, I don't know, just regular, and then the violence starts and then you just like, oh shit, you know, if that's like too much for him, if that mix doesn't flow good enough and he feels like the show suffers because of it, then that's his opinion, that's on him. Me, I think it actually makes the show a whole lot better. I think it makes it different, makes it stand out, and I think it also properly represents the comic in that way. So I definitely do not agree with that at all. Some of the stuff he was saying later on, I kind of agree with, like I said, with J.K. Simmons' performance, and what the stuff he was saying about Cecil Stepman. Even though I like Cecil and what I've seen so far, I feel like his character could be a little bit better. You know what I'm saying? There's some things missing here and there, but at the same time, I feel like it's too early for us to put these characters in a box like we know them yet. This is the first season and there's only 4 episodes out. There's way more dimensions to these characters, way more layers to these characters, and like I said earlier when I was talking about another character, like, it's so much more story and plot, so much more things to unravel, such a long journey that we have to continue to go on with the whole world of Invincible and all these individual characters, that, you know, to be talking about them now is so premature. So so far you could say what you think about them, but there's a lot more room to grow. But I will say, once again, bro wrote some interesting shit. I was talking trash at first, I ain't gonna lie, but the more I read it, like I said, I started to kind of understand what he was talking about. Do I agree? No, but I can get what he's saying. Let me know what you think about what was said in this article. Do you agree with him? Just tell me what you think about how the show is doing overall. Like, what's your personal opinion, especially if you read the comic? Like, how you think they translate in the comic? Like, you know, we 4 episodes in. Do you think it's doing a great job of representing the source material? Do you think it's kind of fucking it up? What do you want to see done better? What do you think is already done good? Let's talk about it, man. Let's get it up out there. So yeah, like, dislike, comment, share, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified for more videos like this one. And you already know I'm gonna put the link to the Discord in the description, so you can hit that as well to join Invincible Disciples. We're gonna get the discussion for Invincible keep going. You already know. And yeah, I hope you're having a good day, night, wherever you are. And until next time, guys, peace.